All right, guys, welcome back to another podcast. Today, we're going to continue our transition on our industry overview from culture, core values, and the education system, kind of over to the business portion. So here we go.
Welcome to the PAWCast.
In the saddle on a Saturday morning, after a night shift,
overnight.
Yeah,
I may have gotten a little bit more sleep than you, but
I didn't do too bad actually. It was somewhat slow, which I'm fine with. So it rested me eyes.
It's so weird because I started in March full time, and like all I saw was just madness, and now it's like, oh, you can breathe here a little bit.
It's just a titch.
Now I'm just gonna. Just one of those.
Yeah. And it used to be where kind of when I first started there wasn't anything to do from like January till April.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like you just knew you were going to work on some special project. And ultimately that is what PAW Health is. It was like, it was just very boredom, but more so trying to focus on industry solutions. But anyway, just to kind of, like we said in the intro, we're still kind of making that swing of the pendulum over to the business side. Last week, of course, we did our kind of highlight, Dr. Katie, just kind of talking to her and her experiences a little bit. And I know that last week we had said we were going to focus more on service availability and affordability, but I think even that, honestly, from a podcast standpoint, is probably jumping the gun to get into that business side. I think where we're at is really starting to say, okay, so you and I have been talking effectively now for 19 podcasts about a whole bunch of stuff. And I think if I was an outsider looking in on these podcasts, it would be like highly theoretical, and just saying like, look at all these things that sound great. But I think in these next couple, and I think what kind of changed my mindset at least a little bit was talking to Katie last week, is saying like, you know what, honestly, to a certain degree, I think if we get more other people's input, because we have a lot of great people in our organization.
Yeah.
We have some people from outside of the organization who work with us. Dr. Caroline's a perfect example from a relief standpoint. But I think as we start to provide that contrast between what are people experiencing outside of our building, what are they experiencing inside our building, and then start to just kind of have that deliberate conversation on saying, okay, as we swing that pendulum from culture and core values and we get over to the business side, we start to talk about business theory, we start to talk about, some of these other, kind of more mechanical things at the back end of the practice. It's like, well, what really does this set apart from what is currently out there?
Right.
And as coincidence would have it, you actually had that experience here just yesterday. So within the last week, of course, of this podcast going live, about basically someone who is contracted to either go in as a consultant to veterinary practices where you're paying, I think you said her rate was like
roughly about $675 an hour.
$675 an hour, which is a lot. Or you have podcasts for free with online content, not to plug ourselves.
In a veterinary world where vets are hardly charging what they're
Correct.
Nearly worth.
Yes, absolutely. So that's one hand where it's like, what are you actually getting for your money when you bring these business consultants in? As far as, how much of it is cookie cutter, how much of it is, again, locally applicable, how much it is unique to the practice itself. But again, when we start to look at saying, well, here's at least one example of what's available to a veterinary owner or office managers or so on and so forth. But even, again, sort of swinging that pendulum through, into just saying, well, if not someone who's going to manage culture, what are we talking about as far as like software implementation and efficiency of inventory and, all these kind of different tools. So, again, I think as we are saying, we're transitioning from culture, core values, education over to the business side. I think it just makes more sense for us to talk about kind of what's out there and some of the challenges that people are going to be faced with in the real world.
Yeah.
And then how people outside of our organization, when coming into our organization, have seen that difference and seen that transition on what really does make our process ultimately revolutionary.
Right. I do want to preempt the conversation itself because this is where I came from, right? So I just want to put it out there in the understanding that, number one, I'm very biased.
Yeah.
Just from my experience in working on a consultative level with multiple different types of businesses and seeing some of the other competition within consultation, I had seen, some good ideas, some bad ideas, but ultimately the thing that really always bothered me was the idea of a move-in ready strategy.
Sure.
So like just here's the things you do.
Yes.
Because every team is different, and it did require some, in our opinion, some significant coaxing about like what it is. And
to that exact end is the reason why we started working together.
Right.
Because for me, coming into PAW Health, I wanted no veterinary industrial solutions.
Right.
I didn't want anything from inside the profession, because most of what you're going to get within the profession is so narrow scoped. It's kind of like we talked about 2 weeks ago with the 515 on saying your systems thinkers and your practical thinkers, is that I think generally speaking, we lack a lot of systems thinkers. I think we have very, very practical thinkers, good problem solvers, but sometimes we lack the long-term oversight or the long-term goal planning. And I think that was one of the appeals, and I was working together very early, is it's like, how many veterinary clients do you have? Oh, well, none. It's like, oh, perfect.
Right.
That's exactly what I want, because between manufacturing, factory work to, banking and all these different types of things, it's like you start to find a trend in how people are managed, and it's not necessarily cookie cutter in the sense, like you said, that move-in ready component. So I agree with you. I think what began our relationship in the beginning was I didn't want a move-in ready strategy.
Right.
Didn't exist and doesn't exist, and even implementation doesn't really exist in our profession. But I think veterinary owners and practice managers, they get sold on that shit, man.
Well, yeah, because it sounds good.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like just do these 5, 12, 25 things, whatever, and you will be more successful. But it's the same concept of like a quick consume blog post. That's just, people don't read the actual body of the paragraph.
Sure.
It's just 25 ways to succeed, right?
Sure.
Like, I can do that. And then it's just like somewhere in the back of their head, but it never goes anywhere.
Sure.
To me, that was kind of the same thing. So I acknowledge the fact that I'm biased on that front. And just really anybody that comes at me from a consultative level, I'm going to be critical of.
Absolutely.
And then, but the other side of that too, that I do want to preface is
but you have the skill set to be critical of it.
Right. And that will, for those that aren't living up here, may sound negative.
No.
I respect what anybody is doing at a consultative level, because it's really hard to sell.
Yeah.
And it is with the intention of improving. So this is one of those differences, right? But like, do you contribute to malicious intent what you can contribute to ignorance? And to me, it's like, I don't think she's ignorant. It's just a different perspective that has provided, I don't think, a full scope of what I would agree upon. So if I start to sound negative, I apologize. But I do want to say that I'm thankful for all of the people that are out there trying to better the industry.
Yes.
Where I just have some disagreements with the way that they're doing it.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I think there's a lot of value in that, though, because what are you not going to get in a typical veterinary practice? Anyone with experience on consultation work. Right. So if it's, it's like essentially the idea of a second opinion, and the idea of a specialty referral. It's like you can have, veterinarians, quote unquote, that are on the same level, meaning they're non-specialists. We have kind of your general practitioners or after hours, non-specialized or whatever it happens to be, but just non-specialized veterinarians. Second opinion is just kind of bouncing cases between. And then, at the referral level, it's like when you kind of go up into like some of the really high performers in one particular discipline between cardiology or anything else. It's the same thing you're talking about, is it's like you would have an expectation of getting a second opinion in almost any other medical case or any other world that we're dealing in, or they say know when to refer, right? But I think, again, like you said, it sounds very good on paper, and I think that's what our industry is really prone to, is something that really sounds good. You end up kicking out a decent amount of money for, I mean, in some circumstances, you'll have some companies that are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 packages where it's like, here's your move-in ready item. Yeah, we're going to assess your practice. That just gives us the metrics of your practice. So when we institute our cookie cutter processes, we can say, oh, look, here's how much better you're doing on what we're telling you to do. And some clinic owners or practice managers, they're going to want a thoughtless implementable tool,
right?
But its effectiveness and its efficiency within a support structure system, especially when we talk core values on Unity, at least what we identify as core values. I think that's where you get a lot of this breakdown. You know, I think we had even talked before the podcast, and I won't jump ahead on your notes, but it was, you know, the, you know, Unity, you know, and saying that, you know, trust was the only thing that was affecting Unity. And it's like, no, actually quite the contrary, not just from core values, but from anything. So, but anyway, so again, I think what I'm trying to drive at is with your level of experience to be able to critique this level of work and these level of consults, guaranteed no one else in the room had that level, with the exception of some of our podcast listeners who were also at this particular thing. I won't name names, but also just saying, man, this is way off mark.
Right.
You know,
so I guess to kind of go, the reason that I went was like, my industry exposure obviously is nowhere near the level that yours is. And I just wanted to go digest what is the room saying about the topics that are being discussed, right?
Sure.
Like, I'm not here to really participate because I'm way too extroverted, and as soon as I start, like, it's gonna get bad. So we're just gonna sit here and absorb. And
just screaming from your pen to your paper.
I could tell that I was being noticed. As I'm writing things down that are completely non-noteworthy.
Yes.
But either way,
3 pages.
The beginning of the conversation, like the introduction to this speaker, was that the guy who put it all together was like, I was just talking to a clinic owner that lost 3 certified techs to Quick Trip in the last 6 months. For those that are not from Wisconsin, Quick Trip is a gas station.
And those things fly up quick.
They do. It's an impressive business model that puts a significant value on process and culture.
Absolutely.
That's the easiest way to put it. Like, for a gas station, like, it's pretty phenomenal. And he looked at the crowd, like, just with utter befuddlement of how is this possible that we would lose somebody of a skilled position that went through schooling to acquire a certification saying that they have the skills to a gas station. And from my perspective, I was like, well, I could tell you why.
Oh yeah, I could probably talk for an hour why. Well, we talked for 19 hours why, actually.
Exactly. And that was like, oh, okay, so now we got to roll all the way back. Mindset's already back to pre-episode 1. And like, that was, I was glad that he started it that way, because it was like, oh, these guys are really just like trying to just survive. Like, that's the whole room. And I was like, I can taste it now.
You were actually in the middle of that hurricane.
Yes. So I was glad that she started it, or he started with that. And then within the first 5 minutes of this discussion, the speaker had referred to this idea of a unicorn practice.
Yes, you mentioned that last
So
night.
she went through, like, what does an ideal client, an ideal clinic look like, and an ideal team, right? And to have all of those things within an ideal set on a consistent basis, in her estimation, and apparently this is more of an industry term than it is a individual's term, is to have this is so unique that it actually can't be found in nature. And I laughed a little bit, because I was like, well, and I was grateful, but I was also like super sad. And I was like, that's not that hard to get. To create a set of clients, we could refer to them as caregivers, that you enjoy, because that's going to be built around process, which we're kind of getting to. But then also to have a clinic structure that is fundamentally strong and a team that fits within it. I was like, shouldn't that be the goal? Like, are we just like, and to me, the idea of referring to it as a unicorn practice, it just completely discounted the rest of the 3.5 hours that you're going to talk about. Because all you just said was, I'm going to give you all these things to get closer to it, but you're never actually going to get it, because it doesn't exist. So sorry.
Which, not to, again, toot our own horn, but it took us 3 years. And it as a growth mindset, in establishing policy and procedure that is focused around education, and so serve the patient and educate the caregiver. That's the whole process. Everything comes from that. And I agree with you. I mean, I think that's why, again, what we have is so profound and led to our awards and all these recognitions and all this different type of thing. It's like, no, I mean, a unicorn to a certain degree is by design, right? It's not quote unquote natural, but I agree with you. It should be the goal.
That was my whole thought. And the only thing that I really wanted to just touch on with that is I don't think it's anywhere near impossible. Like, I think it's very possible.
Yes.
It
comes back to the one of my favorite quotes from Joe Rogan Live is, it's like, I know I'm stupid. Like, I know I'm stupid. I won't finish out the quote, but a part of it though is just exactly that, is that it is very attainable, and that's why, again, I think, like, starting on that unicorn practice part, you're exactly right. It discounts everything that you're trying to say and saying, you know what, shoot 20 steps ahead, because you're probably never even going to get past step 1.
Right. So with all of that too, I do the last thing that I had a thought on with that in the moment was, okay, so you're saying it's impossible. However, I get where you're coming. Like, so that was the me really inferring, right?
Sure.
She wasn't saying that it's impossible. And this is one of those things where it's like, I'm probably overthinking this a little bit. Yeah. But I do really
But you're part of the crowd. And if
I
there
enjoy
are
playing devil's advocate on this stuff. Because how is this going to be received 3 days later by these people? Because that's typically what happens with any sort of seminar is a 100% of 80% of the group actually absorbs it. Yeah. And then of that 80%, 50% of it remember it. And then of that 50%, 1% implement it.
Sure.
It's always extremely low.
Yeah.
So, like, of the ones that are going to remember it, what are they going to remember about this? Like, oh, a unicorn. We're like, well, that's just now an excuse. It's impossible.
Correct.
And that was why I was really kind of sad about it. But the other thing is understanding, like, if you actually put the time and effort in to craft a business structure that is of all of these things, holy crap, do you outshine the rest of your competition?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where, when we talk about, especially as we shift over to the business services and the tangible benefits that we're able to provide, that does kind of come out of that.
But I think, again, you kind of said it right, coming from our section 1.2, I think page 3, which is the assigning accountability, is you're exactly right, is it basically makes the environment, it comes from a place of and perpetuates the idea of victimhood.
Yes.
So it's one where it's just like, well, yep, I guess you'll never actually obtain this, and there's things outside of your control, and you can try to control some of these things, but some variables you just can't control.
Right.
And it's like, but that's, nope. Yep. That's literally, I think, almost like the first line of the definition of victimhood is things are outside of your control, when quite the contrary.
And again, like, I don't think that was the intention of the statement, but it's definitely, like, I've had that thought.
Yep.
Like when I was coming out of college and was like going through sales training stuff, like it was, oh, well, this guy's just really good at it.
Sure.
Therefore, I don't have to do this. Or like, it's really easy to craft the excuse because it's not my fault or whatever it is.
Yeah, the other thing, I had one of my good friends, Jeffrey, I'm actually helping him through some of the 515 stuff, traction stuff, that kind of stuff. And he had actually identified the same thing, that at least there is an ageism component to this as well, is saying, everything happens for a reason, those types of statements where you may find in a professional setting where it's like, oh, that's just the way things are. It's all kind of that same thing where we're saying that if our focus is to help support and hold up the veterinarians that come after us, the veterinary nurses that come after us, the support staff that comes after us, and as the quote unquote elders, because we're kind of like middle elders, right? So as you start to look at, the other elders who are just continuing to feed down this line of saying like, oh, some things are just going to be out of your control. And these are individuals who you may look up to, and you may be receiving that advice, and just that one little quib gets in your brain where, like you said, it may have been where only part of the room heard it, and only part of the room's going to hold on to it, and some of them not even really thought twice about what she said at all. But it's if that person says it to someone who is influenceable, so they can be influenced by these statements, is you may have actually considerably stumped their ability to, one, have a growth mindset, to challenge themselves, to challenge the group, to fail comfortably. So we may be actually taking those tools away from these people. And that's why, again, what we have said time and time again is when we identify talent, is we want veterinary professionals, whether they're veterinarians, veterinary nurses, or unlicensed staff, is we want them pre-graduation to 3 years out. Because if they get one of these little quibs in there and we start to have what is the big thing in talent, loss of self-worth, we start to get these little bits in there, and it's like it may take us several after-action reports. It may take us tons of 515s to uncover this deep down mindset of, guess what? You're never actually going to obtain a unicorn practice, so don't try too hard.
Right.
Right. That's that.
You're only going to get disappointed, and you're only going to fail.
Yes, correct. Wonderful. I want to be disappointed, and I want to fail because the solution is there that you can find and implement, and then once you fail enough times and then succeed, it feels fantastic.
Right, but that's you. So and again, like, this is why, like, when I go to something like this, and I've done this in many different ways. Yeah. It's like, and this is why I'm so careful about the words that I use over the overwhelming majority of the time, is 2 words out of 4 hours of speaking just set these people up to just
right.
I'm just going to discard almost all of this.
Right.
And like, that's, to me, that's frightening,
yes.
I guess is the easiest way to put it. I did just write my notes. Some of these I'll go over, but the one that I found very fascinating, and this was words that I've never heard before, was client compliance.
Sure. Yeah.
So basically, do they go with what you recommend?
Sure. Yep.
And she, the lady was like, what do you guys think just from a gut feelings perspective, percentage wise, what do you think that you are normally having in terms of like total visits, 100% compliance?
Yeah.
10 to 20%.
I mean, we don't need to have the explicit little symbol on this podcast, so I'll try to hold my breath.
10 to 20%.
Yeah.
And like, this was one of those moments where I wanted to raise my hand. I wanted to say like 85.
I was going to say off the cuff, I'd be in the 90th percentile.
Because informed consent.
Yes.
Estimates.
Yes.
High value consultations.
Yes.
High quality exams.
Yep.
Extreme transparency on everything.
Yeah, diagnostic clarity. Yeah, treatment plan clarity. They see the treatment plan several times. We have, of course, all of our medication labels are pure. We have all of that transfers over to then printed discharges, which then also we have caregiver resources to go along with that on educational materials for what we then just went over in that consultation to then clearly identify recheck times with a recapture process that's like, well, we need to make sure you are coming in, So, I mean, as a 24-hour animal care center.
So I will give us one benefit in the fact that we see more sick patients.
True.
Therefore, the urgency is higher.
Yes.
However, a 60% gap.
Yes.
Is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, at a minimum.
Yeah.
So,
and that goes so deep because, again, as we talk about compliance, I mean, the things that I kind of just listed off there, if you look into the industry overview, that's all stuff we're talking about: recapture and engagement and wellness and ailments.
Right.
As it is really the heavy business side of this, which then, of course, bleeds over into, like, again, recapture, caregiver compliance. But it comes back to when it's like a 10 to 20% compliance rate in some settings. It's, again, for us, it's easy for us to kind of, stare down our nose a little bit and saying, well, our governing principles are serve the patient and educate the caregiver. So for me to say, all right, well, there is that huge gap. It's like, why do we have such a massive gap? Oh, well, do we have a team that is serving the patient? Do we have a team that is educating the caregiver? Do we have, are those processes in place? And I think, again, the answer is no. But
I think another big part of that too, and it's kind of going back culturally, is do you value yourself in any way to actually display to the individual that's sitting in front of you that you are of high value. Because if you don't believe it up here, it doesn't matter what your mouth is doing.
Absolutely.
They're never going to get on that page.
Yeah.
So like this was something that I was like, okay, yeah, y'all need to get this figured out.
Yeah.
Now, was there really a solution in place with this one? Not a whole hell of a lot, unfortunately. Yeah. But it's like you need to believe in yourself.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's this whole self-worth part, and so, I mean, we even had that joke yesterday with Shelbert, one of our, front end staff, whose name is not Shelbert, but anyway, where, we were just talking in the treatment area yesterday, and she had said something. She said to me, she was like, man, I really wish I had as much self-worth as you do.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, again, and I'm like, Shelby, we can work with you on that. We can help you with that. That's no problem. But for me, I was like, hell yeah. Right. Like, hell yeah. Yes. One, it's okay. I've been around the block. I've seen a lot of stuff, and I'm going to pull confidence from the things that I didn't think I was going to be able to do that I did do. But also part of that self-worth is just going in feet first and stuff that you don't know. It's the ability to fail, I think is what it boils down to. And that's what breeds self-worth is if you don't have a comfortable environment in which you can fail, it's going to be astronomically more difficult to increase your self-worth. Right. But you can do it. It just becomes significantly more difficult.
So I coach some high school kids, and that was one of the things that I had pushed really early on was the idea of success breeds confidence and confidence breeds success, right? Yes. So you only have control over one of those
at any one time.
Well, really, I don't. That's because I coach a bowling team, right? Yeah. You're only bowling against yourself. That's why I love that sport, because it's like, as long as you do what you do, success is really in front of you, but it's not going to guarantee that you win. Sure. So the only thing that you really have control over in a competitive sense is your confidence. Mm-hmm. So just be confident. Just believe that you can do it. And then when you fail, figure out how you can do it better. Yeah. And then be confident about the fact that you put the time and effort in to get better, so you can be more confident and then find greater success. And mind you, there's 15 to 18 years old. Right. However, that was yes. They just didn't get it. And
up to that point.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
And it's taken a long time to cultivate that. However, this is now year 4. It is shining through greatly with the kids that I started with when they were 15. Yep. And now it's like they just walk in. And they just know they're just going to do their thing. I don't have to tell them anything. I don't have to keep their hopes up or whatever it might. They just go and they just throw the ball.
Nail it. Yep.
And it's like, guys, you don't have to worry about it. So it's the same thing as to me as a consultation or exhibiting value is you just simply have to go into that room with the confidence that you're going to do it well. Yep. And if you screw it up, figure out how you can do it better and go do it again. Yep. Apparently that's being read as imposter syndrome.
Yes, that primarily, yes.
Which I think is ridiculous. Yeah. Because if that's the case, everyone is an imposter in almost every single thing that they do.
Everything. Yeah. Everything. From bowling up to being a doctor of veterinary medicine. Right. It's and I think you can kind of mimic, kind of make fun of it and saying fake it till you make it. But no, literally, and I always, whenever anyone talks to me about imposter syndrome, I understand when you look into the category of talent and talking about the loss of self-worth, I absolutely positively understand where that comes from. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it isn't a valid sensation that people exist, or, that they exist in that world or they exist in that mindset. There's no fucking time for it. Right. There is no fucking time for it. Right. And I think when we start to say, I think about this a lot, to be perfectly honest. And this is where I'm going to start to get just a little bit heated, and not necessarily at the veterinarians in particular, but when, I'm part of some online forums and, some of those talk about, one from an imposter syndrome standpoint, but also as far as getting negative rapport from clients. Pardon me. And I say this because, again, from an anger standpoint, in this, again, I know it has a component of self-worth that I have a very high self-worth. Mm-hmm. But when I get a negative review, I know that I did a really good job by this patient. maybe something lacked in communication, but I know that I tried my hardest in this patient. I established informed consent in saying there are other options for you diagnostically, or you can go somewhere else for referral, or we can try this and here's some options, and it doesn't go according to plan. Now, again, this doesn't happen too often for me anymore. This was very, more so early on in my career. But a part of it was, I remember when I would get sort of this negative feedback, honestly, it was these massively personal attacks.
Yeah.
And it was like, we all have confidence issues when we first kind of start in practice. And for me, it was just more so of like, I just don't feel like I know a whole lot. Coming out of school, you have a significant loss of self-worth. And even from the clinician while I was in veterinary school, that kind of disparaged me. And then coming into practice and having, clients who are then speaking ill of me. And I say this conservatively, it's like, fuck you.
Right.
Seriously.
Right.
Seriously. How fucking dare you?
Right.
And it's like, I don't care. I don't care if I am just an associate veterinarian here. I had a negative interaction with you. I'm going straight to my boss and being like, that client's an asshole.
Right.
And it's like, why my boss is worried about losing clientele. At what fucking expense?
Right.
You want to talk about imposter syndrome? How are we creating an environment where not just, and like I said, I'm trying not to get too heated about it, but a part of this imposter syndrome is having an environment where these people are not allowed to learn, where they're not allowed to fail, and that fail comes with reprimand, and fail really should be coming with an opportunity for growth. And that's what makes me so upset about imposter syndrome. It's not that we have veterinarians in of themselves that don't feel confident in themselves, because we all don't feel confident in ourselves. It's just what it is. But to be put into an environment where you don't have the support of those around you, you don't have the support of the owner of the practice or the administrators in the practice, and you keep getting thrown at the mercy of clients who in of themselves have no idea of the scope of the knowledge that you truly have or the potential that you have, and they make these personal attacks, shove it.
Right.
And that's where I think I have a problem with imposter syndrome, is not necessarily because the veterinarians and technicians are not allowed to feel it. It's that this environment that we have supports it and cultivates it. And then we say, coming into one of these management things where it's like, if you ever want to improve an environment in which imposter syndrome is no longer a problem, it's now a unicorn practice. Right. It doesn't exist, and just live with it. Right. And to me, that's bullshit.
Right. Right. And then we get surprised when 20% of caregivers are compliant with what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
Because the environment that is being perpetuated on a daily basis is just completely that's. That was the whole thing.
Yeah. It's time for change. And we've been saying this now for 19 to 20 podcasts now, and it is time for change. The confidence that we get is in this process. You know what? I believe this from when working as an associate veterinarian. We had really, really high prices. This before we took over. Really high prices. There was a lot of people, either we were euthanizing patients or sending them out the door, or whatever happens to be. Is that when it came to some of these treatment strategies, and it's like, man, I know this is a treatable condition, but our prices are too high and these people can't afford it. It always came back to those animals ended up getting care somewhere. Yeah. They ended up getting, it may not be with me, but they got their normal vet, or there's another vet they can transfer to, or they always get care. It's the same thing for bullshit clients. Them and their animals will go be served somewhere else where they will be happy, but it's not going to come at the expense of my self-worth. It's not going to come at my mental health in any capacity, and it's not going to come at the expense of the team who is there constantly to serve that patient. Right. And that was, Dr. Dane, through this holiday, he had a client that was really just on one of these constant rhetorics of, you're a vet, and these are expensive, but this is my baby, and your prices are too high, and you're telling me that mine, and I can't. He stood up and walked out of the room. He was like, I don't have time for you to talk to me like this. And he just left. Perfect. I was like, high five, Dane. Yeah. It's true. Yes. When we're talking about working 8, 10, 12 hours days, we're sacrificing our family. We're trying to seek fulfillment from a profession that is dying in tradition and dying into corporate medicine. We're sacrificing ourselves, and then we just keep getting hit from all angles. Walk the fuck out of the exam room, walk the hell out of the clinic, and find a different job, and find somewhere that you will be fulfilled, because they do exist. Sometimes they do exist means you have to create it. And that's where we have the ability now to say, hey, this is the structure by which you can take any practice and turn it into this quote unquote unicorn.
Right.
Is that this is something that happens by design.
And that goes back to kind of just to follow up on what Katie had said last week, right? Of like, what else could I do?
Yes.
Where else was I going to go?
Yeah.
Like, this was the only way
Yeah.
to go after going through all of that stuff and trying to over-please people because of directive.
Yes.
Right? And like just being just constantly just crapped on and having to take it
Yeah.
because of, corporate numbers. And
Yeah.
just the
Corporate numbers. Yeah. The same problems for different reasons.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's why that's and again, like kind of following up on that statement of there was only one way to go after
Right.
that point.
Yes.
And this was it.
Yeah.
So this is later on my pages, but it is directly in concept with it is that in sales, generally speaking, they say 80% of your clients require very little of your time, and 20% of your clients require almost all of your time.
Sure.
Fire the 20%.
Absolutely.
Just buy.
Yeah.
And
they will get served somewhere else.
Exactly.
It's not that they are lacking care or you are withholding care.
Right.
It's that you're focusing on the greater good.
Mm-hmm. And we had to do that a few weeks ago with patients that were overly aggressive, right?
Yep.
So this was specifically process related.
Yes.
Because we have a patient separation process.
Yep.
That happened.
Yep.
And those patients went off the reservation. They were just, nope, dad's not around. Time to rip off faces.
Yes.
And so that caregiver was respectfully asked to go find care elsewhere.
Yes.
Monday morning.
Yep.
Like if you need us to call somebody for you
Yes.
or whatever, just to like state the level of urgency,
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep.
However, there's nothing I can do here.
Yeah,
Like
just not gonna do
I've
it.
never heard my doctor say this before. Like
Right.
literally
Yes.
never heard him say like I cannot examine these patients
Right.
because our staff and I will get injured.
Yes.
And then we get a one star from this guy saying we should all go work at McDonald's.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's like if I didn't have the scope of understanding of why that process happened the way that it did.
Yes.
Like I could totally see how somebody could just wear that like
Yeah.
just a big red patch
Yeah.
and just like, oh yeah, there's that one.
Yeah.
Like we couldn't do it.
Yeah, they just gutted me because I kept my staff safe. Like, okay.
Well, that's just the thing. Like, I think having the not even intrinsic, but just clearly stated value among our entire team,
Yeah.
is like empowers them to make decisions like that.
Absolutely.
To get up out of the
education
education room and just, okay, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
I have
Nope.
other patients to serve, sir.
Yes. Yep.
Bye.
Yes. And I think, you kind of say, 80% of your clients don't require a lot of time. You say that 20% do. It's 10% at the low end and 10% at the high end.
That's true.
That's
It's
true.
true.
It's
Yeah,
not
for us,
like,
it's definitely more like that.
Yeah, it's not, that's why we kind of say serve the middle 60%, serve the
Yeah.
middle 80%.
Yeah.
But yeah, to that end, you're exactly right. I think the best thing that could have happened for our culture is that I and Katie, of course, Katie came over at least full time a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that had bled through was that level of high self-worth and saying like, nope, I know what I'm doing to the degree that I don't know what I'm doing, but I know what we're doing is fantastic.
Right.
But yeah, to bleed that through to the staff, that's why I gave Dane a huge high five. I was like, good for you, man. Mm-hmm. And I even told him, I said, there's no reason why you should ever have to put up with that. Like, just leave, and he's like, well, I'll put up with a little bit of it. I said, as executive order, understand that you have to put up with 0% of it. He's like, well, I know some people just kind of blow off steam. And I'm like, that's fine. Yeah. I'm like, but at least from me as quote unquote, the owner of, the whole shebang, it's like, just know that on my back, whatever this turns into, if it turns into a complaint process, I got your back.
Right.
There's books about that.
There are many books about that. We, at some point, there's one particularly that's called that I would like to go over in its own setting.
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of value in the tools that are included.
And it's literally, I got your back.
It's literally called I've Got Your Back, yes.
Yeah.
I read that book probably 4 years ago and consistently reference it.
Yeah.
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
with all of that and kind of that idea of empowerment, right, is one of the things that they had touched on in this discussion was an ideal team player is a go-getter. And then you take all of the stuff that we just talked about, right? It's like the common idea of a go-getter to me, like what is implied as a problem solver, somebody that gets out there and just kind of figures it out and is willing to dive in and go and get something rather than just sit on their hands and wait.
Sure.
So like potentially more accountable, even though the word accountability at this point hadn't been spoken or written anywhere in the room once.
Sure.
And so I got what they were going at, but then it's like you realize that you're just now just perpetuating the fact that all of this stuff is just going to completely destroy all of that. Like everything that has been discussed in this room, and I know that the majority of it is what we're talking about is problems, but you already set yourself up for the excuse of the problems are going to continue to just exist.
Right.
So now when we get a go-getter, like, oh, you're an awesome team player, but we're not going to change anything.
Yes.
Okay. Well, how long is that going to last?
Correct.
And not long.
Yeah. How is that person going to gain ongoing purpose and well-being?
They're going to gain by getting out in 7 years.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Right.
They're going to go to Quick Trip.
Yeah.
Where accountability is valued.
Correct.
So, which is, again, to me, hilarious. Like the fact that it is a gas station.
Right.
Like, yeah.
But it's a service industry.
It is.
You know, and I think that was one of the things that kind of checked off when I was trying to get PAW Health started in the beginning. You know, of course, I had a little bit of my own money to invest, and I was kind of looking around for other investors. And basically, the pitch that I had put together when I was like, PAW Health is I know this mindset is the future. And again, this is before we really had any established anything. I just knew and I trusted what in my head was exactly what the industry needed. What I basically wrote out to anyone who I was seeking investment from, which was no one in the end, I had to do it all on my own back, was that we have to exclude the veterinary profession as being something unique. It is just a service industry, and that is it. Yep. And I think did I talk about the quick oil change? Did we talk about that?
We did a little bit last week.
A little bit the last one, but yeah, it pretty much just. I mean, I won't necessarily go over it entirely again. But my dad, he was a 1970s gearhead. You know, he got automotive up to the service industry, service manager, and ended in education. And basically, he and I have always seen eye to eye. Where it was, and I think I might have said this, is he treats mechanical animals and I treat biological cars.
Yeah.
But it is essentially the same thing. Is when you start to look at what the veterinary industry is as a service industry, I have absolutely, and that's why I think we kind of made the joke, is like I actually have no surprise that people are working for an organization like Quick Trip, which, I mean, Quick Trip has an amazing model.
They do.
They
do.
know, but if you look at it from a pure service industry standpoint, it's everything that you would want in just a work environment. If you could institute that in any other, and then we're just saying institute into the veterinary profession, So I'm sure their implementation strategy is different, obviously, because it's kind of specific to the gas station industry,
right.
But it's unanimous.
Well, the interesting part about that is probably two or 3 years ago, when on the consultative side, we were looking at building a level of education system that we had put the wheel out of, like, how do we make this transferable across multiple industry types, business types, whatever, and like just kept running into barriers of like, well, it doesn't really fit here, and you need the individual look and all that sort of stuff. But the big comparisons that we had when we were looking at it culturally were Quick Trip and Chick-fil-A.
Sure.
It's like, okay, so you have a fast food joint and a gas station are on a national level the two models of cultural consistency and quality.
Yes.
Woof.
Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah.
Yet we've got, like on the other side, and in the actual discussion yesterday, she kind of shit on him a little bit. Was tell me about an accounting practice that has that. Right, service industry, technically,
right.
Team-based environment,
right?
And I don't know. I've never worked in an accounting practice, and I bet it exists somewhere.
Yeah, ours, our accountants.
Yeah,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go. Right, and like that's, again, like that mindset, and again, watching the words is like, well, It's just another excuse.
Yeah.
It's just another excuse to be like, well, it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
That doesn't really, like, Quick Trip's just the exception to the rule of trash.
Right. Right. And it still keeps coming back to, I mean, for us, by her definition, I think we've kind of skirted around it, but by her definition, I mean, we have one of these unicorn practices. Yeah. And like to say that it's by design, it still comes back to Joe Rogan. Like, I know I'm stupid. Like it's, these things are very, I don't want to say they're easy to implement, but I think that it's a very simple solution that has a complex implementation strategy. But, at the end, it can happen in any industry.
One of the other things that she had referred to a lot in the thing was the idea of receiving what she referred to as rainbow moments, which is just like the feel good moments.
Okay, sure.
So again, this is me extrapolating a little bit. It wasn't specifically discussed in this specific setting this way. However, again, I know it's going to be heard this way over time. Is what she meant by a rainbow moment and looking out for it is be grateful. There are a lot of positive things in your life, regardless of how bad your culture is, regardless of how bad the business structure is. Like, in most days, like, it's still probably pretty good. It's still, maybe
sure.
I don't know. Like, just be grateful, right? Just find the positives and be grateful, because even if it's not at work, you have a job,
sure,
right? You got to work because you have a vehicle, or you're able-bodied enough to get to work.
Sure,
you have a home, whatever it might be. Like, there's a lot of things to be grateful for.
So it's a split from the first world problem type thing.
It's essentially that.
Yep.
So with all of that, what the way that was not how it was detailed, though. It was go and try and create these grateful moments, and then the focus of the entire discussion went directly towards caregiver interactions.
Okay.
And trying to find the things to be grateful for within those interactions, and I know I'm going a little far here, so stay with me. Basically, what the conversation turned into was you are now subject to the volatility of a caregiver interaction, because you are now putting yourself in a position of no power, because as much as you put into it, your positivity is based exclusively on how they react to what you put into something.
Sure.
And you cannot control what that person does.
Correct.
Right? So with that idea, again, I get the idea of being grateful and putting the work in and trying.
Yeah.
But that's not where the value comes in.
Right.
The value is putting the work in and trying. It's not in receiving the edification from somebody else.
Right.
It's like, because that's the Dane situation. Like, Dane's consultations are extremely thorough. His informed consent is amazing.
Yeah.
His medicine is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, boom value.
Yes.
How that's received does not impact him in any way.
No, exactly.
And it's like, okay, well, if you're not going to value this and you're actually going to try and tear me off of it, I know what I do is extremely good.
Yep.
Therefore, I'm going to leave.
Yes.
It's not in any way, shape, or form about the fact that you're now receiving thanks or hugs or whatever crap that you're going to get from somebody else. When you get that stuff, it's great. It feels good. You can be thankful for that as well. Yep. However, that cannot be the linchpin for your feeling of success.
Correct. It's at least in some capacity, you're still maintaining the victim mindset where you're going to put in, and then
it's a powerless state.
Yeah, it's a powerless state, and part of it is you're in some capacity allowing that caregiver to be both the rescuer and the persecutor.
Yes.
So it's
100%.
I'm going to maintain victimhood, and whether or not I make this a rainbow moment or if this turns into a moment of disparity is exclusively based on what you give me back. Right. Yeah, that's bullshit.
Exactly. And that was my whole and again, I don't think that's what the intention of the discussion was, right? I believe that the intention was be grateful.
Yes.
Just find the things to be grateful for. And the fact that if you're if you're fresh out of school or 3 years out of school and it's like you just feel like you're getting beaten down, be grateful by the fact that you have the education set to where you can go find a job somewhere else if it's just not for you. Like it within the industry that you want to work in. And at some point, somebody's going to receive whatever it is that you have to say. Us.
Right.
But like that's really that was the idea. I would argue that the third day thought of this is going to be, well, that person was terrible, therefore I didn't do my part, and now I am worth less.
Correct. Yep.
It's
it's institutionalized issues within talent.
Right.
You know, and you don't necessarily have to even call it hierarchy, because I mean, again, we say that on our industry overview, there's so much overlap between culture and self-worth and kind of all those different things. But
So with that, then within probably 5 minutes of it, the words, and I really wanted to write this one down, the words specifically were people deserve to feel good. Like really soon thereafter this discussion.
Okay.
I take significant issue with that. And I'm not saying that people exclusively deserve to feel bad.
Yes.
However, feelings are what they are.
Yeah, right.
You're going to feel the whole width of emotions across the board.
Yeah.
And people deserve to control the way that they feel.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not really about like, and this is again me kind of being an a-hole, so I apologize, but looking outward and expecting people to make you feel good is just a recipe for disaster. Yeah. It's just not going to happen.
Was she coming from a place of like people deserve to feel good, like the customer is always right, or is this like people within the team, or was it just
it was mostly team focused,
non-specific?
So like you show up to work, you deserve to feel good.
Sure.
But with the flavor of you're looking at caregivers and expecting good edification.
Sure.
Like very close in like.
Sure. So the juxtaposition of those two concepts is what,
Right.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about it from, again, a third day's thought perspective. I'm going to come back to work on Monday, back to my 8 to 5 clinic that it's been okay for the last 3 years. Yeah. And my third interaction with a caregiver is going to be kind of crappy. Yeah. And they're going to be non-compliant with what I recommend or whatever it might be. It's like, I don't feel good. I deserve to feel good.
Right.
Maybe I should just go on to the next one. Maybe an excuse to not problem solve my way through this one or whatever.
Well, no, that to me is exactly what it rang through on, is saying I deserve to feel good. I didn't get it from this client. I think again, it become I deserve to feel good. I think not in every circumstance, because I agree. I think we all deserve to have purpose, and we agree we have purpose and fulfillment.
Absolutely.
Well-being, shared well-being, shared purpose. I mean, that's all there. I'm not saying not to have that capacity. But again, I think it becomes a coined word that you allow it to become a barrier.
Yes.
Where it's just like, okay, well, I deserve to feel good. This person is making me feel bad, but I'm not going to actually, like you said, problem solve at why this situation went the way that it went. Mm-hmm. Now, you may not actually be able to engage that caregiver again to rectify that situation. Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Right.
But if you have a scenario where you're starting to find, like for many years, I had this issue. I don't anymore. I feel like a lot of veterinarians do, at least on the forums that I'm on constantly, is that there's kind of this like contention between veterinarians and breeders, where it's like, well, the breeder said this and the breeder said that. It's the same thing. Dr. Google said this and Dr. Google said that.
It was a 10-minute discussion about that yesterday.
See? Funny, right? So anyway, when we start to, sort of come in saying that it's a barrier for progress. Yeah, I had a bunch of negative experiences with breeders because I was in that mindset, at least to a certain capacity, that they were against us and we were against them. That was kind of culturally what I was brought into. Mm-hmm. But when I started to continue to have these negative interactions, I burnt bridges with a lot of breeders over the years, but I started to problem solve it and saying, oh, well, why is this continuing to happen? And some of it is, my compromise is I just don't engage certain types, but what is part of my solution for fulfillment is I actively seek out trainers, breeders, people within sort of the unlicensed or, sort of untrained medical side. We just did a whole thing for police and search and rescue dogs and so on and so forth, is that now instead of me trying to gain some degree of fulfillment from people in, the exam room, I'm gaining fulfillment by giving information to those people who are willing to receive it.
Right.
It's not a matter of them appreciating what I'm receiving, what I'm giving them, but it has more to do with, no, I actually feel that I feel good because I have problem solved through this issue, and I'm creating less unnecessary conflict by doing so. But I think that's my big concern with that and saying everyone deserves to feel good is, does that then become a barrier in your brain against progress and growth?
Exactly. And then not too terribly, actually it was a little while after that. I don't really remember the flows.
Chronologic,
She actually did go into the psychology of how we have thoughts, like the way that it passes through, basically fight or flight to your emotional brain to your rational brain. Every thought's going to go that way no matter what, because we're hardwired to do that. And then she had this example of basically you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways you can have thoughts. Essentially, one can be negative, one can be worrisome, one can be a victim mindset, one can be anger, and one can be basically just an emotional and energy suck.
Sure.
But then there's the rational one, and just pushed towards that. So again, I think that it was there in intention, but with understanding how that process goes, and then not watching the words of understanding, you don't actually have to look at other people to feel good. You can do it yourself.
Yes.
It just, there was some mixed messaging, I guess would be the easiest way to put it. And I wanted, I was hoping for some significant more clarity on that front, because even when it went into the discussion of do I go at this situation with a negative mindset or with a rational mindset? To her, it was a little bit of a growth mindset in this instance. It was still with the flavor of the expectation of when I have a rational mindset on this, that it's going to be received positively, and therefore I'm going to have a rainbow moment and I can feel good because of the way that this person reacted to it.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
How many times are we overly rational?
Yeah. Right. Right.
We're extremely pragmatic.
Yeah.
And just tell people what's happening from a rational perspective, and then it just they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah. No, I get that honestly in consultation, and actually some of my ongoing negative reviews are people actually find me to be too objective.
Right.
And that, again, for me, I think is a pretty good compliment, in just saying they always what are the coined questions I get in every consultation? What would I do if it was my dog? Some of these other, types of, kind of humanization or personalization questions or comments. But at the end, it really comes down to, no, I have a system of rational thought that allows me to establish not only informed consent, but to put together management strategies that are in the animal or the patient's best interest, which may not actually coincide with the human's best interest. And I think that's where we do kind of start to blur the line on some of these things and saying, who are we actually serving? Because if, again, we're looking to caregivers to receive that good feeling coming back and saying, well, guess what? We're going to have some real difficult conversations that even if you have a high bond spectrum client where, we're talking fur baby spectrum, to me, that's part of our process is engaging neutrality. So I don't care if I have a hunting dog, a farm dog, or a fur baby, I'm going to be providing them with the same level of objective data. And that's when we talk about the rational mind. It's if we can get to this point where, and I think this is what we talk about in our podcast, at least certainly in the cultural section, but as we move and transition, swing that pendulum over to the business section, you'll start to see that a lot of what we're doing is actually kind of like a harmonization, where basically a graying or a neutrality type perspective on how policy is developed, people are handled, so caregivers are handled, how patients are handled, is it basically allows everyone to be treated as equal.
Right.
But what comes from that is that we know, again, that we're upholding our core value and our core statement of serving the patient, as we are getting this individual fulfillment through shared purpose and shared well-being. So we're getting this sort of good feeling because we know what we are doing is good work.
Right.
And that is completely independent of what the people receive that as. Because again, you can have on one hand of the spectrum, and I'll say someone was more of a working dog, and you're like, this dog just needs to be euthanized. That is literally the most humane. And they're like, you know what, honestly, thank you for being honest with me. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well, I mean, I'm still doing this because I'm gaining fulfillment by making the best recommendation for this patient. Swing the other way into fur baby, you know, we're not even saying fur baby, we're saying way beyond that, top 1% anthropomorphization. And it's like, how dare you tell me to euthanize my patient? How dare you? And then, you know, so but for me, okay, there's going to be those veterinarians and those professionals who are like, oh my God, this person's really getting mad. It's like, well, no, they're getting emotional. You're just sort of the outlet for that, but your recommendation was made in the best interest of the patient. Right. And that's where, again, I think when we start to everyone deserves to feel good, it's like, no, I feel good in that high anthropomorphization setting where it's like, I feel good because I actually made the best recommendation for this patient. I don't actually care what the person's reaction is. Right. You know, don't get me wrong. Again, I think all of us like people to be happy. That's nice, but I am not in a happy business. Right. You know, I am not in a happy culture. I'm not in a happy industry where 7 years technicians and nurses are out of the profession, where a significant amount of my colleagues are considering suicide. We are not in a happy place. So for me to say, no, my happiness is brought from what I am doing and the good work that I'm bringing to the community and the good work that I'm bringing to my staff. And again, it comes back to this self-worth aspect. I actually don't care whether I have a caregiver who's like, thank you for being honest. And on the other hand, they're like, screw you for being honest. No, I'm actually completely fulfilled because I was honest. Right. You know, and that's where you get bedside manner, you get these negative reviews. Oh, online, Dr. Riolo's such an asshole. And I'm just like, yeah, probably, you know, but part of that, you know, is I'm not saying I don't have tact, because there's a difference between just kind of being a jerk. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying we're just being a jerk. What I'm saying is that if I'm presenting the same information to 5 different people and they're all receiving it different ways, I still presented the same information. I'm not any better or any worse. Actually, Annie had heard me catch a phone, or I was on the phone one time. She actually heard me. I had to talk to a husband. I had to talk to a wife. And she was like, how did you nail every word exactly the same over a 5-minute informed consent spiel? I was like, she's like, that was like a recording. I'm like, well, you say the same stuff for 15 years, you know, like you really should have it on auto load. But again, you know, I don't mean to ramble, but again, it's sort of like tying these concepts together between saying you're never going to achieve the, you know, unicorn practice, and you should always be looking at other people to feel good, and you deserve to feel that way, and, you know, try to find the good in the day. And, you know, it's just like, you can't, if you want to maintain a high level of self-worth, stop caring what people think about you. Exactly. You know, that's it.
That was all I could think about the whole time was like, you know what? You want to feel good? Make it happen. Yes. Do it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't know another way to put it.
No. And there's nothing wrong with it.
No, there's not. But the thing is, the thing that people are afraid of is now all of the accountability is on them. Like, if I feel bad, it's my fault. I have to own it. I have to create a solution. I have to implement that solution. That's a scary thing to do for a lot of people because they don't have the skill set to do so. Yeah. So I completely understand why it is legitimately frightening for a lot of people to do. However, if you want almost zero volatility in your emotional status, right? Like, you can have you know, variability, right?
Yeah, we say first reaction, second reaction. Right.
Yep. However, as it comes to a stability's perspective, if you put that on somebody else and you're rating for edification or whatever that might be, like, boom, you're just gonna all over the place, and what's gonna happen over time is the trend's just gonna go down. Because as much as, you know, it's the rule of for every one good review, you have 10 crap ones, right? So it's the same with interactions. Like, you're gonna have your good ones, but you're gonna remember, and you're going to have more of your bad ones because when people get when they experience negative emotions, they're gonna say it more.
Yeah, no, and for me, I just chuck it out.
Exactly.
You know, and like, I think a part of it is, it's like, you know, so I don't know if every generation is this way, but, you know, I mean, I graduated in the year 2000. So, you know, for us, it was like, we were like this unique group, this unique age range where it's like, you guys are the new future and you're going to make a difference. And, you know, so I feel like through most of my elementary hood, middle school to high school hood, it was all about, like, you know, be yourself, be an individual, don't worry what people think about you. And so through that process of just like, you know, like, oh, okay, all right, yep, I'm doing my thing, and I'm looking to make a difference in the world. You know, I'm not really going to care what people think about me. And then that's why, again, I carry such a high level of self-worth. Is it's just been ingrained to me since I was a kid. It's like, the same thing now, what did I read recently? It was about little girls playing with boys' toys, and saying like, oh, that's a girl's toy. It's a boy's toy. You can't, mix these two sides. And it's like, well, who cares? They're toys. Why, girls can be scientists, girls can drive a tractor. Girls can do these things. Like, why are we telling them they can and can't do things? It's the same thing. Like, again, when I was growing up, it was just like, no, you're here to make a difference. You're maintain self-worth. Don't worry about what people think about you. It's not about looks and personality and all these different things. And then I get into a profession where it's the exact opposite, where the culture of the clinics, the interactions with the caregivers, all of this whole cultural aspect of a broken industry is nothing but telling you how terrible you are all the time.
Right.
Right. And that's why it was so bizarre to me that, like I said, that clinician when I was in early vet school, where it was just like, you actually don't have the ability to touch me because I don't even respect you. Yeah. Like it never connected. Yeah. And I think, again, that's what we're trying to come back with in all of this.
Right, but most people don't have that level of maturity at 19 years old.
Correct.
To be able to handle the criticism from a board-certified clinician saying that they're terrible.
Correct.
Most people are going to take that and be like, you're right.
Right.
That's it. Like that's the end of their thought pattern. It's like, yeah, you're right. No. And now I'm just starting the trend downward.
Let me. I got one. I know we're getting towards the end here, but let me give you this one. So, Eric Langdon.
I have way more notes.
Yeah, no, that's okay. From Michigan State, he's one of our listeners, and I love that guy. He's my point man at MSU. But anyway, he was telling me that him and some of the other administrators within the university, they were kind of instructed to get together. So there was from athletics, certainly from College of Vet Med, from engineering, whatever it is, and basically they just sat him into a room and said, figure out what you guys have in common, specifically as it related to kind of like student handling and student affairs and so on and so forth. And essentially what it boils down to, and I hate to misquote him, but this is essentially what I took away from it, is that all these top performing athletes to top performing engineers, veterinary students, medical students, all these different groups, what they all had in common is the higher you went up in performance, the lower self-esteem that they had.
Oh, say that again.
Yes. So the more performance that these people had, the less self-worth that they had, essentially, the lower self-esteem that they had.
Really?
And it's part of what we talk about is saying, like, for me, it was like there was 1,600 applicants the year I got into veterinary school. I think I was, 100 of the 1,600, and saying, like, now we are into such a small percentile, 1/16th of the crowd, to then say we're going to bell curve out those 100 people to say we now have the ultra elite smart in the top 5%. Like for me, I think I graduated in the mid-2s for my GPA, which is like, you think, oh my God, he's a C student. It's like, well, that shit's fucking hard, like they throw a lot of stuff at you, you know? And so that's then where they basically say, like, as you start to get up into these really high elite students, whether it's from athletics to medical to whatever it is that you actually start to see more and more and more and more institutionalized disparagement that is actually showing these high performers that they are actually bottom of the totem pole, and that's what we kind of talked about from a hierarchy standpoint. So it's still on that.
So it's basically, I got to knock this one down.
Yeah, pretty much on
a consistent basis.
Correct. Yeah,
because it's motivating.
Yes.
And it's making them succeed.
Yes. Yeah, and that was like, again, there may have been other common threads, but that was essentially the common thread that they were able to find in their own way in this own problem-solving think tank. And then it basically came down to, how do we fix culture? And then it was actually, like I said, then in its own way, it kind of led over to our section 1.1 and 1.2, making it over to the provost of the university. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff just from a tool standpoint, not necessarily going to implement the whole thing, but it's just like, to say that we have these really simple solutions that are complex in implementation, but they are really straightforward. But but again, it just comes back to that self-worth and saying, you're exactly right. Like, I mean, what did I say? Yeah, I got into vet school when I was 19, so it was like, from 19 to 23 years old, it's like maybe part of what saved me was just being fucking naive.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's saying, like, I've been told my whole life that I'm going to make a difference in the world, and that I have the ability to make a difference, and that I'm going to make a difference, and that I need to carry myself with self-worth. Like, that's just who I was and am. I don't think that's ever changed. But yeah.
Just now that makes that transition out of vet school like even more like real.
Yeah.
Because like you get out, and now there's nobody to knock you off.
Yes.
There's no one to knock you over so you can get back up and prove your value.
Yeah.
So then you go out and you essentially look for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you're waiting for self-fulfilling prophecy of failure.
Yeah, flagellation. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other? There were two other things that I did want to touch on. The first one was that the belief of, and I think that this was when the material I felt just started to go way over the heads because
Scope.
Yeah, is that the belief was that the superpower to success within a practice is to have a team that is at a high level of emotional intelligence. And so basically, emotional intelligence is being able to understand yourself and the reactions that you have, and understanding other people and understanding the reactions that they have. So when you look at it from let's take the variables that we're familiar with in the TriCore.
Sure.
So understanding yourself extremely well, understanding the strengths, understanding the weaknesses that you have, and then understanding how that interacts with the potential other set of variables that other people have.
Yep.
Within that, you've got 4, 11, 17, 21, 27 within one of the more complicated, but again, 3 pages, 27 variables on the TriCore that this individual is now saying the superpower is for you to understand all of them extremely well and understand how that is also going. Like, you don't have that information on that other person, so you're going to have to infer it.
Sure.
And then be able to control it.
Sure.
That's a big task.
Yes.
For 98% of people.
Yes.
I had that thought in a different set of strategy when we were actually working with one of our shelters with their euthanasia process.
Sure.
Because their staff wasn't really understanding like the way that they were reacting to the euthanasia process and the decision-making process was greatly impacting those that were having to fulfill that process emotionally. So basically, like, person A is taking 3 dogs because it's that time, right? And like everyone else is like, oh, blah blah blah, like I feel bad, and like, why are you doing that, right? So then my thought was, well, do we teach these people emotional intelligence because they don't understand what they're saying? Yep. And what I really came down to in that conversation and understanding the talent level that was there, and just purely from an educated perspective, is like, no, that will never be absorbed. Yeah. It's just too much. It could be cut, and not to say that they aren't smart people, but that's massive. Like, that's such a big thing where, like, for me in that specific instance, and I think is a better rule of thumb, is to go to process, to explain the process of why this decision was made, to let them understand the process
in their own way,
because the process should be core value aligned.
Right.
The process should be in alignment with the ultimate purpose of the practice. And with that, if they don't agree with the process, they're in the wrong place and they can just leave.
Yeah.
And then over time, with the war of attrition, your culture turns into one that is aligned, and you don't have the people that are negatively reacting to the process that is extremely justified and a part of the whole picture.
That comes back to us being incredibly pragmatic and objective. Is that, for us, like you said, the war of attrition, but as you were kind of going through that, as the Humane Society was one example, it's like, no, actually, I think about that internally with us as well. Yeah. So we talk about, and I just said a moment ago, neutrality, the graying, the equality of the process is its process and process. We're not actually taking away people's individuality. We're not doing that. We're not asking them to fit into some bubble. What we're saying is, so let's take that emotional intelligence component, right? So what we do is, on the objective fashion, we have our variables. We say, okay, here's a process, right? So whether we talk about patient separation, or we talk about euthanasia policy, caregivers present, IV catheter, all these different types of things where it's like, this makes the most amount of sense, which is why we meet every other week from a leadership team standpoint, look at all of our issues, as we talked in the 515, between our issues to our 1 years to our 3 months to now the 515 for other administrators, but also our to-do list, is we are incredibly pragmatic about creating process.
Right.
And when we start to say, okay, well, this is actually serving the purpose of the patient, and this is serving educating the caregiver. And then, like you said, we have people who don't align with process. It's like, all right, well, do you just not understand it?
Right.
Can I teach it to you? That's our education system. Can I help you understand it? What we're not doing is controlling their emotion. That's what we talk about: first emotion, second emotion. We're not saying you can't have this emotional response. All we're saying is that a lot of what we do has to be set in equality, and part of where you're coming from into this organization or into this process may actually mean what you're doing is you are placing your emotions on someone else.
Right.
You are placing your judgment on someone else.
Yep.
You may be in this place because we know our process is pure on equality and pure on objectivity. We're not asking anyone to, go outside of themselves. What we're saying is just be respectful of one another.
Right.
And what I like about the tricores, like you said, the 27 variables, whatever it happens to be, is what we then end up doing is we have conflict, right? Well, we have an entire section on how to create accountability and manage good conflict between the case reviews, the after action reviews, and essentially be set in forgiveness. I mean, that's section 1.2, whatever page it is, page 4 or something like that. Yep. But again, it's saying, okay, we have processed that when we lack emotional intelligence or, so that emotional understanding between employees, like we can actually acknowledge that is occurring. Right. That we actually have this lack of understanding between these two individuals. We have process to then help those two people figure it out.
Right.
And saying this is why this occurred. Like when Annie and Rachel had their verbal review, is it was like, oh, this is clear. Annie, when words come out of your mouth, they don't hit Rachel's brain right. And Rachel, when they come out of your mouth, they don't hit Annie's brain right.
Yep.
It was literally those two sentences. I didn't have the vocabulary of saying, well, actually, on a systems thinking and practical thinking standpoint, and you guys just think this way, you think that way, and that's why you guys weren't seeing eye because it was a big picture, small picture type item. It was like, oh, it's just you guys aren't hearing each other the right way.
Exactly.
So it's, a lot of times it's saying you're not going to align. So I agree with you bringing that up as a point and saying, as far as emotional intelligence, a part of it is having a system to get through conflict. That's what it is. It's not saying you have to have a team that has perfect emotional intelligence.
You cannot walk into an interview expecting, or even like into an onboarding process. Let's give them 90 days to be proficient in this.
Yep.
No way.
No.
I've been doing this for years and I'm still like a C- student.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to do. It takes time and it takes effort. You cannot understand it from reading a book. You have to practice it. You have to experience useful conflicts.
Yes.
And that one of the things that you had mentioned in that, and is actually the last thing. There are more things, but to me, this is kind of the thing that I did want to end on, is the idea of that was implied in this whole conversation was that if you are an emotionally intelligent person, even on an individual basis, you can understand when you're about to have a negative, worrisome victimhood, anger, or an emotional draw reaction, and you can be rational about it. And the specific wording that was used on multiple times, and it was really the tone of it, was to gag the first emotional reaction.
Oh.
It was specifically gagging the emotional response.
Okay.
And to me...
Because that sounds healthy.
And then followed right up thereafter, she had talked about how you essentially have a specific tank of energy, and she had used just like dog bones or something.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever. All right. So it takes you 2 to get out of bed and 2 to get through half the day and blah, blah, blah. That's the
spending energy. Yeah.
The thing was like, oh, well, you end up on a negative and therefore that leads to burnout. Right. Well, what else takes energy?
Right.
Gagging your emotional response. And that's one of the hardest things for people to do. Yeah. I get it. Be a professional. Be an adult. Check your shit at the door.
Yeah.
But if something's really pissing you off that bad and you need to go be mad, go be mad. Just don't waste time. Don't waste energy. Just get it out so you can just breathe again.
Yes.
This is not some Zen place. There are emotions that you're going to have your own reactions to stuff. You can't gag that.
No.
You can be professional, but
Yeah. We talk about that
man.
all. I mean, I've said, how many podcasts have I said it now? Have your first emotion to get to your second one. And that's where, I mean, I think the words.
And that's the rational part.
Yeah, that's the rational part.
But the thing is, if you continuously gag the first one, you're number one, you're being extremely disingenuous to yourself.
Correct. I was going to say that.
Completely lying to yourself.
Absolutely.
And then where does that lead to? An extreme lack of autonomy. Now I just expect a robot, not an individual.
Correct.
You need to behave a specific way consistently because I'm expecting no emotions out of you, or even just like a little bit, or just be really, really rational about it. Like, no, like you're human.
Yeah. Well, no, then it perpetuates an environment of disparagement. So if you are cultivating an environment where, one, we said you have high emotional intelligence, and that high emotional intelligence means that you don't have any emotion.
Exactly.
That sounds dumb. That sounds dumb.
Exactly.
You know, because then what happens is you create an administrative infrastructure, like you said, to lack autonomy, but you create an administrative infrastructure that disparages people's first emotion.
Yes.
You have an emotional reaction here. You're not being rational. Now listen, and I'm not going to be gender specific here, or at least my own thing, but I've had plenty of girlfriends where the last thing you want to say is, calm down, you're being irrational. Let me tell you what doesn't work ever, okay? Now, that's more specific to my own experiences. So we're going to say, let's go ahead and found a principal operation on that and saying, you know what, don't have that. You're being irrational. I can't imagine a more volatile environment.
Exactly.
That sounds terrible.
Exactly.
You know, so that is concerning. But again, when we start to say, like, no, to me, if I was going to define, what emotional intelligence is, it's just having emotion, and it's just understanding, like, emotion is a part of who we are.
Right.
We are not robots. We are individuals. And I come back to the review clarity meeting that we had with Rachel, is that, coming into the end of that is, for her, there was one very key moment. It was the metric which ultimately led to the 515 report, is there was some kind of low markers on her performance review, and she really wanted to talk about why that was. And it's like, the only way she was going to get over this hurdle is, like, I'm not going to be able to implement the 515s because I can't stop thinking about why I got this low mark. And we were kind of like, we kind of don't have, like, specific examples. And that was, like, the final mark where it was like, I said to her, I'm like, Rachel, you're just not going to get specific examples because we just don't have them. And it was like this wave where you could tell the emotion was, because she was getting teary. We were getting emotional. We were having that first emotional response. And then I'm like, so in order for us to continue to improve together, we're going to start to do the 515 so we can just sort of break the system and find where these issues are and tackle the problems when they happen. And it was like, boom, second emotion, aha.
Right.
Obviously. And she had said she went home and talked to her husband, and he was like, did you guys figure it out? Whatever. She's like, no, I didn't get any examples. He's like, what? And she's like, yeah, but we're going to get better. And well, how are you going to get better? We're actually just going to get better with this 515 because it's going to allow me to get better. He's like, none of this makes any sense.
Yeah. Which, from an outsider's perspective, I get it. I understand how that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Listen to the podcast, episode 19.
Yes,
it's right there.
Exactly. But it's really what the key to that.
The emotion.
Exactly. You didn't say stop crying.
Nope.
You didn't say we're going to be rational about this.
No.
And this is what's going to happen.
No, I know not to say that.
Right. But that conversation took a number of hours to happen because that wasn't the only emotional reaction that had to happen. There was a full and that was what our after action from about 4 weeks ago was also like. There was some emotional stuff that was just put out there. It's like, I just got to say it. I just have to get this out. And understanding, like, that when we went through the after action, that's why the facilitator is so important, right? To keep it,
someone outside keep
it in check a little bit. Is that all of that stuff is really about expressing that so you can get past it, you can get over it, and you can now get into the world of rational thought, problem solving, implementing solutions.
Clear past forgiveness.
Don't gag the first emotional reaction. Cannot, again, be a professional about it. Understand the process that it is. Be an adult. I get it. But
you kind of said minimize impact was
but don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to the people that are around you, because that's the other thing too. And like, I will very much admit I I try really hard to be a cheerful person on a day-to-day basis. But there are many days where I am not at 100% of that. And I communicate that to everybody at the onset. Regardless of what it is, like I just walk into the room and say, guys, I know what you are expecting, and this is what's happening. So I apologize in advance, and if it becomes a problem, let me know.
Yep.
Right. But that's allowing me the opportunity to be, that's the professional portion, but it's also not requiring me to lie about the fact that, or faking the fact that I'm just in a great mood all the time.
Correct. Yes.
Right. Like, to me, that's how that's done.
Yeah.
So I got really, when that happened,
triggered.
And it was, I hate that word, but that's basically what it is. And then she talks about like this whole energy thing, and like I do want to go over this one because this one bugged me. You had 13 energy tokens for the day, and she asked, how many tokens does it take you to get out of bed? Guess what the group's average was? Out of 13.
12.
4.
Okay.
4 to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I was like, if it takes more than 1, what?
Yeah.
It's you just get up.
Yeah. Yeah, I had actually a discussion with someone at the gym the other day. Maybe it was last week or something like that. But it was, it was basically the mindset of you die once, but you live every day.
Yes.
So it's, the people that are, in some capacity in older life, there's at the end of their life waiting to die, that kind of thing. But for me, it was more on like, again, it takes me 0 tokens to get out of bed. 0.
Yeah.
Like, and part of that is on the growth mindset and like finding an opportunity to fail for the day. Like I look for opportunities to fail. That's probably messed up by most people. Like I look for a chance on how I can actually get better that day, and I do the best that I can in that day, and I wake up and I am thankful every day that I wake up, between, I'm lucky enough to not have, a lot of congenital issues, or family traits, those types of things. But it's like every single day I wake up, I'm like, one more.
Right.
I got one more. And it was, the woman, at the gym, she had said, if you knew this was going to be your last day, would you come to the gym? And I'm like, well, yeah, obviously. Like, of course I would go. It's the last day I get to go to the gym. Like, I would want to go.
Right.
So it's that mindset of, okay, make the most out of every day. Not tomorrow is never promised. I mean, there's all these, I think, kind of these key coins that come into it. But it's, if I have 13 tokens, I think honestly the way in which I would spend them is I would take 0 tokens to get out of bed and find the most efficient way to give away all 13 to someone else who needs them.
That was what the conversation turned into with those, whereas like the more that you give to other people, the more they're going to give to you, right?
Yep.
But so like that's where it ended up. But like it was the onset of that conversation of like again going to the mindset of the people that were in the room of like it takes you people 4 of 13 just to get up, like cheer up a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
and again, I don't think it's cheer up from the perspective of like you deserve to be good, you deserve to be treated well. You know, I mean, I think it's again, and I think for a lot of people in our profession, we know it's identified. There are mental health issues. I mean, depression's a real thing. And I think it's not to be completely sort of ignorant or negligent of people who do have legitimate issues, but it all intertwines together. We're talking about this swing from culture and education over to the business practice side, and it swings right through all of our problems again. That's why I kind of have them separated on side, is it's like the only way you can go from culture, core value, and education over to business and PR is you got to swing back through the shit to get to the other side.
Right.
And it's, again, coming into, getting up and getting out of bed, like I get it's tough. I understand that it's tough. But when we look at the solutions that we have, and then of course when we have speakers coming and talking to us in this fashion in a very subtle tone of acceptance, that's what I have heard from you in this whole thing, is that there is a tone of acceptance of being powerless. And what I really want people to take away from these podcasts and our efforts in the industry and our efforts on the local level, our efforts in the individual level, is that you don't have to settle for this. There is a way to make things better, and even if we don't think that there is a way to make things better, I guarantee you there is a way we can make things better.
Right.
And that's, I don't know if that's necessarily want to end it today.
No, I think that's a great
know.
ending point because it does end on a positive note, to kind of to go back to the beginning. Number one, I'm extremely thankful for the individual that did this.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I do want to just finish that because there was a number of value points. So
she sounds like a very practical thinker. Systems may be outside of her range, but
they're very, that was the impression that I got, potentially worded towards the audience in the attempt to create consumable items.
Sure. Know the crowd.
Right. But I do have a level of, a significant level of gratitude for what she's
Absolutely.
doing. So
out there trying
you.
it. Yep. Trying to make a better world.
And, but yes, that does go to the final point as we swing over to the other side is everything that is in here, at least of my understanding, and I think of yours as well, is we have control over it. At some level. We might not have control over the whole thing, but there are many, many variables that are out here and are in front of us that we can control to create better, a more defined purpose, more well-being for the people that are ourselves and the people that are around us, and start to make some differences for patients on both a culture side with working with caregivers and also a business side and making care more feasible as well. So I think that's a fantastic transition into jumping into availability and affordability, right? Because that's really where the whole concept of how our service bubble grew
essentially
is like, what are we trying to do from a business perspective?
So the center. And I think coming into these next weeks, I think maybe we'll try to line up a few more interviews, maybe get a phone in or something like that, and just kind of continue this move and kind of give you some more real world type experiences. But I think that was a pretty good one. So
thanks for the time, man.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week.